Hello and welcome back to Chance Myanmar. You are going to learn the final part of this unit, which is presenting data. So we have already looked at starting a presentation, organizing your information, and closing a presentation. The next essential lesson is presenting data. So let's get started. Well, you should use data in your presentation to give evidence that backs up your argument. So you may have some research, you'll have some findings that you could show in a nice chart or other visual. Think about this. 90% of information sent to the brain is visual. So you don't want to continue talking to your audience. You need to show them some visuals. They will absorb the information in a better way. It's also easier than describing numerical information in words. Think about this. 90% of information sent to the brain is visual. So this is why it's so important to use visuals in your presentation. Some people in your audience will better understand the information that is being presented. Another reason for using visuals in your presentations is that it is easier than describing numerical information in words. So instead of trying to find all the words, you can just have a nice visual and people will be able to quickly take the information away. Like my earlier point, I said that it's easier for some people to take the information they need a lot more quickly. Well, that's because trends and proportions, they become more obvious. So using data, visuals in your presentation can quickly show the audience about any research you have done, about earnings, a company's spendings, or the value of stock. So what are some common visuals? Well, in your presentation, you can use line charts, pie charts, line charts, also called line graphs, perfectly fine. So line charts show a relationship between two variables over time, and pie charts show percentages and proportions. You now need some phrases to introduce your visuals. So let's go through some that you'll be able to use. This graph shows you. How could you apply this to your presentations? This graph shows you the number of people who finish that sentence. If you look at this, you will see, how would you finish this? If you look at this, you will see the difference in spending habits over the last 2 years. This chart illustrates the differences in spending habits year on year. This graph gives you a breakdown of our generated revenue over this amount of time. Fill in the gaps. I want you to practice completing these phrases. You need to make them apply to you. Next, from this, we can understand why our sales have been declining over the last year. This area of the chart is interesting as we are able to see why our sales have been declining over the last year. Of course, you are going to have to describe the visual in your presentation, and there's some nice language that you can use to do that. So we've got things like to compare, compared to, as opposed to, or versus. I would like you to make a note of these, write them down, and then start constructing some sentences. To compare, you could say versus, more than, greater than, or less than. I would like you to research all of this language and I would like you to practice using them. I will be checking this later in our live sessions. Of course, line graphs, they move up, down, or the same. So you can use some intensifier words and adjectives to describe these differences. Let's consider these. Slight. This means a slight movement, only a small movement. It was minor, or it was steady, so it didn't really change that much. You could say it was dramatic, a big change. It was major, it was massive, it It was disastrous. Hopefully, you're not going to have to give presentations on disastrous facts and figures and numbers, but you never know. You could also say unparalleled. This is quite strong. This means you've not seen this before. It was gradual, so it kept on moving gradually. And then it was sharp. You will use these to talk about time. Let's take a look at describing downturns. So, downward movements. We've got some nice general terms that we can use. So, decline, decrease, drop, fall, slide, weaken, and dip. These are all nice general terms that you can use to talk about downwards movements. What about some strong terms? Slump, crash, collapse, plummet, plunge. These are really, really nice, strong terms. You could say it was just under our target. To say just, this is like saying slightly under our target. And we've got way below our expectations. This means it's really, really below your expectations. We've got a slight. Again, I want you to think about the strength of some of these words. A slight decrease in revenue. A notable decrease in revenue. If it's notable, then you can really see it. It's notable. A significant decrease in revenue. The downturn began in, so now you're talking about when it started. Note the month. The downturn began in February. The situation began to deteriorate, get worse in February. The number has continued to fall. You could say the number has continued to fall since month. So you now know how to describe downward movements. Let's have a look at upward movements. Let's go through some nice vocabulary that you can use to help you do that. So, like before, we could say a slight increase in sales. We have seen a slight increase in sales. We have seen a constant increase in sales. This means it just keeps on going. It's constant. A marked. Think about marking something. We have seen a marked increase in sales, or we have seen a substantial increase in sales. You could also say an increase of about, an increase of roughly, an increase of approximately, or you could say in the region of. So you should have noted already that we can't be certain about the actual figure. Roughly, approximately, and then you will say the percentage. Moving on, a little over, a little over. It's about what we predicted, about what we predicted. The recovery began in February. The upturn began in March. An overall increase in revenue, for example. How else can you complete this sentence? An upward trend in the demand of. Sales reached record levels. You've never had this before. It's record levels. Reached a peak. Think about a peak being at the top of a mountain. You've not seen this before. So sales reached a peak in February. A strong surge. You've already heard this word today. A surge, okay? A surge in the sales of. And then think about the product or the services. By month, the figure had risen to. By February, the figure had risen to $100,000. We predict that sales will soar in the coming year, or you could say, we predict that sales will soar over the next 2 months, over the next few months. So we started with downwards, we've looked at upwards. What happens if there is little or no movement? How can you describe that? Let's have a look. So we know that if the chart remains the same, we will describe it as stable. Let's have a look at some strong words. We could say that it is stale. Stale. When you eat a piece of bread and it's a little bit hard, it's stale. Stale. Stagnant. If you're in a position for too long, then you can become stagnant. Your energy, these numbers, they are immovable. Immovable. You could say that they are holding steady, or they are leveling off, or they are beginning to stabilize. I want you to check the meaning of some of these words, and then I would like you to make some sentences. It's very, very important that you know how to use this vocabulary. You can do this by looking online at some examples. The information is there. Back to describing little or no movement, you could say, our growth is relatively stable. After all of the ups and downs, their growth is stagnant. So let's have a look at some phrases you can use to conclude. You have given the data. Now you need to summarize. What do you take from the data that you're presenting? Let's have a look. So we must focus our attention on, and then you will come to some point in the data. There is a necessity for. What do you think the company or whoever you work for needs to do from this data? What action must be taken? We have no choice but to fill in the blanks. I strongly recommend the result or the outcome will be. As always, I would like you to practice using these phrases. Make them applicable to your presentations. Great work today. That was the end of this unit. So you've got 4 lessons which should complete your presentation. You need to make sure that you go over, and like a jigsaw, you need to put the pieces together. I would suggest that you look at some examples online. People like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, listen to some of these presentations. And if you have to make a presentation, remember the most important thing that you can do is prepare for it. Thank you so much for coming today, and I hope to see you in the next unit, Unit 5. I'm very, very excited about this one, and I know that there's lots you're going to learn. See you soon.